Hey, I'm Heather and welcome back to my channel. I am a life coach for busy entrepreneurial mamas who want to grow their business with more heart and less hustle. I teach emotional health tools like how to manage your mind, how to process your emotions, and why it all matters so much in unlocking the limitless life that you know you were created for. Today I want to teach you a really practical tool called Fill in the Blank. This is a tool that's going to help you redirect your brain when it wants to go to the worst case scenario in your business, in your relationships, and in your health. Let me give you an example of how this plays out. We're on Instagram and we're scrolling through our stories, and all of a sudden we see that several of our friends are at an event and we were not invited to this event. And we start telling ourselves the worst case scenario story of why we weren't included. It's because they don't like us. It's because they don't value us. It's because they're super selfish that they didn't even think of asking us if we wanted to be included. It's very normal for our brain to create this worst case scenario drama story because it feels like it's being threatened. One of our core needs as a human being is belonging. And so when we feel like our sense of belonging is being threatened by being excluded from something, our primitive brain jumps into action. It goes into that fight, flight, or freeze mode and starts scrambling around to try and figure out how we can stay safe. But unfortunately, when we're thinking they've rejected me or they're not including me, how does that feel in our bodies? What emotion does it create? It creates insecurity, it creates anxiety. When we're feeling insecure, how do we show up for those relationships moving forward? Maybe we totally pull back and put up a wall. Or maybe we try extra hard to put in effort with those people to try and bridge the gap of this disconnection. When we show up from insecurity, we create more disconnection in the relationship. All of a sudden, we're acting weird around these friends and they're like, why is she being so weird? Maybe we don't want to include her. So our worst fear of being excluded ends up becoming the reality, but not because they were excluding us in the first place, but rather because of how we showed up from the insecurity that came from the story we told ourselves about them hanging out without us. I know it's really hard not to jump to that worst case scenario, but there is another option, and that's where the fill in the blank tool comes in. The reason it's called the fill in the blank tool is because there's a blank in this story. Our friends were hanging out without us, and there's a reason why, and that's the blank. That's the piece of the puzzle that's missing. We don't know why they were hanging out without us. So we know what our brain wants to do on its default setting. It wants to tell the most traumatic worst case scenario of why we weren't included. But there are three other options, that are more useful than that option. The first is to leave that blank blank. The truth of the matter is we don't know why we weren't included. We don't know why they got together and we weren't there. When our brain is like, why weren't we there? Why weren't we invited? We respond to our brain, I don't know. That's the truth of the matter. I actually don't know. They didn't tell me, I didn't ask, I don't know. The second option of what to do with that blank is to ask. We can go to this person. Oh, it seems so obvious, right? But we don't do it. This is not what we do. We can just go to the person and ask. Hey friend, I noticed that you and some of the girls got together. Just curious why I wasn't invited. Now, we want to make sure that when we ask, we do it from a clean emotional place. We have to first address our worst case scenario story and remind ourselves that it's just made up and that we actually don't know, and get ourselves into a more neutral, energetic, emotional place before we ask. Because if we ask from insecurity, it's just going to create more insecurity in the result. A great emotion to create in order to feel more neutral is just curiosity. Instead of judging why they showed up the way they showed up, we can just be curious about it. Isn't it interesting that they got together and didn't invite me? I wonder why. From that place, we can go to the person and just ask. Not aggressively, not insecurely, with true curiosity. Hey, I was just wondering why I wasn't included in the event. The third option that we have, if we don't want to tell ourselves, I don't know, and we're too scared or we don't have the relationship to just ask, is we can tell ourselves the best case scenario. yes, we are actually allowed to tell ourselves whatever story we want. Now, I can hear some resistance and I can hear some people saying, but what if it's not true? What if they actually didn't want me there? My response to that is, how does that make you feel? And does it serve you? We don't have to tell ourselves any story that doesn't serve us. So why not tell ourselves, I think those friends really do love me, but they genuinely just forgot. Or maybe it was a last minute thing and they didn't think to include me. Or maybe they thought that I had too much going on and they didn't want to add another thing to my plate. There's all kinds of options other than the worst case scenario that can make us feel accepted, loved, and safe. And the point is that if we're gonna take action from our emotional space, we want to create an emotion that's gonna help us show up in a powerful way. When I tell myself, they really do love me, they just forgot to invite me, I feel accepted and loved. And when I feel accepted and loved, how do I show up for the friendship? I reach out, I try to connect with them, I continue to put myself out there. And then I create the potential for connection. Now, there is the possibility that maybe those friends don't want a relationship with me. But if that's true, the only way I'm gonna find out is from safety and love for myself. If I'm in a place of loving myself and I ask them, hey, why wasn't I included? And they're like, because we don't like you, because we don't want to be friends with you. That's a beautiful thing. That's a gift that they have just given me. They have shown me who they are as people and given me the opportunity to leave those relationships and go find friends who actually want to be with me. You guys, if your friends don't want to be with you, they're not really your friends. And that's important information to know. But if we react in insecurity and fear and self-doubt and anxiety, we are not going to get that clarity. We're gonna stay in relationships that are not actually serving us because we're too afraid to hear the truth. Let me give you a review of the 3 options that you have other than telling yourself the worst case scenario. Number 1, you can leave that blank. Just remind yourself, I actually don't know. The second is that you can ask. Go to the person and ask, why wasn't I included? What's going on? And the third is you can tell yourself the best case scenario. Assume that these people love you. Assume that they have good intent. And create an internal emotional place for you to keep showing up in an aligned way in your own life, because that is all that we have control over. We cannot control the way people are going to think about us or treat us, but we can control how we show up. And the most powerful way for us to show up is from a place of love and safety that we can give ourselves by the story that we tell ourselves. If you found this helpful, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below this video. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.